There is a particular kind of confidence that runs through a lot of post-war British television. Not optimism exactly, and not arrogance either. Something colder than that. It's the confidence of systems. The belief that if you apply enough structure, enough expertise, enough procedure, the world will eventually give up its secrets. The stone tape is often described as a ghost story. It has the trappings of one, an old building, a violent past, a presence that won't stay quiet. But that description is misleading, because the thing the program is actually interested in isn't the supernatural at all. It's what happens when systems refuse to recognize that there are things they cannot process. The premise is disarmingly rational. A research and development team moves into a new building scheduled for redevelopment. Almost immediately there are disturbances. Sounds, sensations, a sense that something in the fabric of the place is wrong. Crucially, nobody treats this as a mystery in the traditional sense. There's no sense of superstition creeping in, no gradual surrender to fear. Instead, the response is procedural. Measurements are taken, equipment is installed, hypotheses are proposed. The haunting is treated not as an interruption, but as a problem domain. And that's where the show's creator, Nigel Neal, makes his decisive move. What the stone tape shows us is not science failing. Science failing would be reassuring. Failure would imply a boundary has been reached. Instead, what we see is something more disturbing. Science that refuses to accept failure as a category. Every anomaly is reframed as incomplete data. Every contradiction becomes a calibration error. Every human cost is dismissed as noise. The system doesn't break, it hardens. And the more it hardens, the more destructive it becomes. This is why the title matters. The stone tape theory. The idea that traumatic events can be recorded in physical structures and replayed under the right conditions is not presented as folklore. It's presented as a breakthrough, a way of making the irrational legible. But the program quietly undercuts this at every turn, because what's being uncovered isn't a recording that can be replayed at will. It's a process that cannot be controlled, only triggered. The system believes it has found a mechanism. In reality, it has found a door. What makes this unsettling is not the presence itself, but the behaviour of the people confronting it. At no point does the system ask whether it should continue, only whether it can extract more information. That's the real horror of the stone tape. Not that the past intrudes on the present, but that expertise assumes entitlement. Understanding is owed. This places the programme firmly within a recurring strain of British television that's less interested in fear than in authority under pressure. In Sapphire and Steel, systems exist to contain temporal disturbances. They have rules, protocols, jurisdiction. But those systems only function until they encounter something that doesn't recognise them. The moment the disturbance stops behaving as expected, authority becomes performance rather than control. In The Prisoner, the system is far more elaborate, a total environment built to manage behaviour, extract compliance and neutralise dissent. But again, the instability comes from within. The village doesn't collapse because it's poorly designed. It collapses because it believes its own coherence too completely. Every attempt to impose clarity only produces further ambiguity. The stone tape belongs with these programs because it stages the same failure at a different scale. There's no village, there's no metaphysical agents, it's just a workplace, a hierarchy, a project timetable, a set of professional assumptions, and yet the outcome is the same. The system cannot admit uncertainty, so it escalates until the damage becomes irreversible. One of the program's most unsettling achievements is how mundane this all feels. There are no gothic excesses here, no theatrical hysteria. The most frightening moments are bureaucratic ones. Decisions taken in meetings, risks reclassified, warnings noted and ignored. This is horror expressed as workflow. It's tempting to see the stone tape as an ancestor to later television experiments, particularly those that play with audience trust and institutional authority. But that lineage only holds if we understand what the program is actually saying. It's not warning us about technology, it's warning us about epistemology, about what happens when systems mistake method for wisdom. That's why the program still feels so uncomfortable, not because it suggests there are things we don't understand, that's a familiar idea, but because it suggests there are systems incapable of recognizing that fact. Systems that will continue to press forward, gathering data, refining models, issuing confident conclusions, even as the ground beneath them becomes unstable. The haunting is not the threat, the insistence on mastery is. This is also why the stone tape resists being reduced to atmosphere. It's not about dread or unease, though it does contain both. It's about process, about the way organisations absorb anomalies without ever letting them alter the underlying structure, about how catastrophe can occur not through recklessness, but through professionalism. In that sense, the programme feels less like a ghost story than a case study, a dramatised failure analysis, a demonstration of how confidence, when insulated from doubt, becomes dangerous. If this way of thinking about television works for you, it belongs alongside Sapphire and Steel and The Prisoner. All three are concerned with systems that believe they are in control. All three show what happens when that belief becomes absolute. And all three suggest the most unsettling thing television can do is not to frighten us, but to show us how easily certainty turns into catastrophe. And thanks very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed that. I will be back at some other time with some other TV show. Bye.